Hello everyone and welcome to Formula Euro League Tier 1 for the Canadian Grand Prix here in Season 7. As I said, we are here in Canada for the Canadian Grand Prix. It's a track that produced a lot of fun racing and a lot of penalties, so that'll be something the drivers will have to watch out for today. I am your commentator for today, Jackson. Today I am alongside Alex, who I believe is having some microphone issues, so I'm not sure if he'll be able to speak just yet. But hopefully Alex will be able to talk soon. Yeah, we're in for hopefully an exciting race as usual. Got 15 drivers in so far, perhaps a couple more to join. But again, a very strong grid here this week, and it is anyone's guess as to who will win this one. 3 drivers I'm hearing now to join during qualifying, so hopefully that will bump the grid up to at least 18 cars, which would be fantastic. Yeah, so far this season we have seen I'd say not domination, but definitely a control of the championship by Shizou Midnight, who drives for the AlphaTauri team. However, drivers like VSR Duncan and Kyle think have shown very good pace. CRG Benjamin's another driver who's shown good pace. However, I'm not sure if he's in the lobby yet, and I'm not sure if he is racing today or not. He may be one of the drivers to join mid-qualifying. But as always, got a very strong grid. ADRT Mode Stroll, another strong driver. Fiati Balliner, another great driver. Deso F1, another driver that's shown a lot of form. And there's many other names that perhaps we haven't seen before. It'll be interesting to see how they can do today. We'll just have to wait and see, as it appears the drivers are readying up now. So we shall prepare for qualifying. Weather's another factor that can always come into things around this circuit. Canada, it's had its fair share of wet and dry races. Could go either way today. Either way, I think it'll be a very entertaining race. Penalties, as I said earlier, could definitely become a defining factor about this race, as they're just so easy to get around here, because it's one of those tracks where if you don't push the track limits and don't push the limit, you're going to, put simply, be slow. So it's very almost a choice between pushing hard and getting the warnings and sitting back, as I believe the one and only Alex Bomberg is now able to speak.
Yeah, thanks Jackson. Welcome everyone. I've located my headset and we're online. Looking forward to today, Canada. I'm sure you mentioned it a moment ago. Always throws up an interesting race tyre strategy, something the drivers will have their minds on, more prominent here than sometimes other tracks, which tends to be an easy one-stop. With the slow speed corners around here, can churn up the rear tyres, so could we see some potential two-stops happening here today, Jackson?
I mean, I would be surprised if we didn't see that. That's the great thing about this this track in general, is that it does open up to multiple different strategies, because we may see some drivers go for the one stop, we may see some go for the two stop, and with the degradation being quite high around here on the soft tyre in particular, we could see pit stops. The pit window is going to be quite big, because we could see drivers pitting early and getting a big undercut, but then they might have to use a harder compound later in the race. But the weather looking very nice for this qualifying, Alex.
Yep, of course. Obviously, if it was real life and the race wasn't cancelled, of course it has been for the last 2 years as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, it would be prime June time in North America. However, this isn't the case. You know, we're all sat in our bedrooms, and me and Jackson are shouting at a TV for the next hour or so. So, nevertheless, the game generated nice temperature. Will probably result to high track temperatures. And one thing you mentioned, we were talking about strategy, but in terms of tyres, this is the racetrack where Pirelli bring the softest 3 compounds, being the C5, the C4 and the C3 compounds. In days gone by, that may have been the Ultrasoft, even the Hypersoft was bought here back when that was in use. But yeah, the softest tyres, so highest wear, albeit the softest tyres, still the soft, medium, hard, which I think we'll all agree makes life a little bit easier for some of us, rather than having Hypersoft, Ultrasoft, ranging all the way up to Ultra Hard we had at some point. But softest compounds, I expect to see a bit of irregularity between the drivers and the split strategies. One thing I've noticed already, Jackson, VRT Balliner out on the medium tyres, as is Midnight.
That is an interesting call there from those two drivers. Two drivers who definitely know what they're doing, so you'd assume there is quite a lot of thought process behind this. Of course, it could just be to get a bit of a side to lap in, but it's also perhaps just to see what those mediums are like in around a quali lap. Because I mean, if they're not too slow, perhaps it is worth qualifying on them. But then again, I mean, if you're sitting at the back of the field, with a field as close as this, if the tyres are got a significant delta, if you're sitting at the back of the field, you might as well go for the softs, even if it's just to try and get higher up into that sort of lower half of the grid, so that you can start on the tyre of your choice. But I think you would need the medium tyre starting, the medium tyre to start on, to manage the one-stop strategy, because softs, I don't see them being able to do the one-stop. The hards are quite a durable tyre, but they're also a very slow one, so you're not going to want to use them too much. So I would imagine those that do try the one-stop will be medium to hard. But I mean, the medium tyre, not only does it open up to a potential one-stop, it also opens up to a potential sort of alternative strategy, which often does work very well. Because they then get to go on the softer tyres towards the end, and at a track like Canada where you can very much overtake, that could potentially lead to a gain of positions later in the Grand Prix. But we just have to wait and see how these guys perform on each tyre compound, because I mean, if they're a second lap off the pace on the mediums, I doubt they're going to want to qualify on them.
Yep, you weren't wrong when you mentioned Ballina and Midnight both know what they're doing. Midnight, multiple time race winner, he sets the fast lap of 7.5. Ballina is going to follow. Of course, Ballina in this past week did get invited to F1 Esports next season, so keep an eye out for him in the Challenger Series or into the Pro Draft. I'm not entirely familiar with how the selection process works, but I'm sure all of us here will be well behind Ballina. His first lap was invalidated actually, so he's going to have to tidy that one up. But Midnight setting the pace, and setting the pace on the medium tyres.
I mean, it's a statement of just Midnight in general, the fact that these attempt clear of the field. Duncan even on the softs attempt off. Now, of course, it's early in the session, so these lap times are, so a lot of drivers may be making mistakes. But, I mean, everyone's in the same boat here. Midnight is genuinely currently fastest on the medium tyres. But, because of being on the medium tyre and having less set to them, unlike those on the softs, he probably that's going to be his only lap on these medium tyres. He will likely now have to pit and just watch the rest of the session, if that's what he chooses to do. Whereas the guys on the softs have 3 or 4 attempts if they would like. So, whilst he's top at the moment, I very much doubt he'll stay there, and if he does, that would be possibly one of the best qualifyings I've ever seen. But a long way to go, so still all to play for Alex.
Yeah, well, let's not forget, it's the start of the session. I'm not taking anything away from Midnight here, but it's the start of the session, and with the track being less rubbered in, less grippy, the actual difference and differential between the two compounds of tyres is less than it would be, say, at the end of the session. Nevertheless, there is a differential there, and, fair play to Midnight. He's ever so slightly over 1/10 clear of Duncan, and we know Duncan absolutely no slouch. So, as you said, a statement of intent. Ballina wasn't able to get a lap in on the medium tyres. He's back in the pits now. So, as you said, that is his only set of mediums gone and out the window.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Midnight does. Will he try and go out on track and perhaps he's selected the soft tyres, so is he just going to commit to going onto the soft and that's it? Or do you think he's going to maybe try and fool some of the other drivers, go on the mediums and just not quite complete the lap? Because, I mean, that's something we see in real life happen quite a lot. So it'd be interesting to see if Midnight does try that. But, I mean, I struggle to see Midnight... I mean, you'd have to assume Midnight's going to drop far down the order. Although, I say that lap time is still a very good lap time, no matter the situation. So, I think that's going to be a tough one to beat. And, I mean, to be fair, another thing that's highlighted here at the first runs, 6 people have set a lap time. That's less than half the field, and now it's 7. And, okay, so before I started this sentence, there were 6 people on the board with a lap time. And that just shows how easy it is to invalidate around here. So perhaps that has played into Midnight's hands here. And perhaps whilst he's pushed absolutely to the limit of track limits, risking it all on those medium tyres, perhaps drivers like Duncan, Lars, Kai have perhaps just played it safe, just getting a bank lap in, not pushing track limits too hard, not risking it all too, not risking it all too early in the session. But I mean, I'm struggling to find ways to make Midnight's pace there seem anything less than superb, and simply put, it is fantastic pace from Midnight. but it'll be interesting to see what he does next in this session.
Yeah, no doubt. Cone becomes the third driver to take to the circuit Gilles Villeneuve this afternoon for qualifying, or this evening I should say, for those in Britain and European. We're barking on night, but back to Canada. Cone becomes the third driver today to hit the track on the medium tyres. Neat and tidy through the first sector. His first split is a 19.0. Not sure how that stacks up to the rest of the field, but I'm gonna go follow him on this lap. There's a big oversteer there, and he's put it in the wall. Front wing damage for Cone. I'm not sure if you caught that, Jackson, on the stream. No, just a bit of contact with the inside curb, lit up the rear tyres. Tried to carry a little bit too much speed through that right kink just at the start of the second sector, and the rear left says, "You're having a laugh, aren't you?" He's looped round into the wall, and you know, another driver who's not invalidated as per the game, but invalidated as per lap time and damage. Their medium tyre run, and they won't. Well, they can go again if they really want, but then the tyres will be, you know, the best part of 3 laps old by the time they come to the race, should they choose to start on it. So you've got to question whether that's worth it or not.
That's very true. That is the risk of being on the medium tyres, is that you only have one attempt really. That's your sort of your one go at it, because then if you have to do that second attempt, you might as well be on the softs. There is still a small advantage, but given the pace disadvantage, it's not going to feel like it's worth it. As Ballina casually puts in a 107.3 to top the times on soft tyres, showing us why he is in. Is it that I'm as unwise as you when it comes to the format of the Challenger Esports series. For the sake of it, I'll say Challenger series. Note that I'm selling him short rather than selling him too much. But Ballina either way goes top just over 2 tenths ahead. 2 tenths and 1 millisecond ahead of Midnight, but you'd expect that on the soft tyres. But still interesting to see that only a 2-tenth gap there, as Midnight is out on the softs as Dolatomi joins the lobby. But Midnight's lap here is going to be one very intriguing to watch, to see how much he pushes on it. So heading down the back straight now, still in no ERS, just preparing for the lap, getting everything absolutely perfect. He turns up the engine now. And Alex, would you like to talk us through a lap here by Midnight?
So, keeps it well clear of the wall of champions. A lot of champions fell foul to that wall over the years into turn 1. It's a kink left deceiving corner. That inside curb can hurt you. Same with turn 2. Power here is crucial. It's a short run up over the crest. We're now going downhill for 5 and 6. Keep it out of the wall on the right. Midnight does that perfectly. 7 and 8 barely corners in these modern F1 cars. Purple and turning left, then right. This is where Cone put it in the wall. No such issues for Midnight as we activate DRS for the second time in the lap. All focus now on the apex of this little right-hander chicane. Don't exceed track limits. Midnight has got that absolutely slap bang perfect there. We're going to come up to the end of the second sector split. Purple again for Midnight as we brake heavy into this right-handed hairpin. The most important exit on the track. Traction's good for Midnight, not perfect. Little bit of wheel spin. I don't think that's going to cost them too much. Third and final time of the lap now. We've opened up DRS. We've got a bit of traffic. It should clear with 2 more corners left on the racetrack to go. Midnight use as much track as possible, run it right up to the wall. We're going to stick right to minimise the distance to the line, and there we go, a 106.9. What a lap from Midnight. That is, I'm going to put my 5 pence down on the table right now and say that looking unbeatable right now. A 1 minute 6.9. I haven't seen a lap that quick. I personally haven't.
Neither have I. I am gobsmacked by that. That is, I'm lost for words. I'm genuinely lost for words there. He's quickest in every sector. He's quick everywhere. It's just simply put, he's quick everywhere.
I think the best thing about that for Midnight is he's still probably got a 10th in it. Little snatch of the brakes into the second chicane, little bit of wheel spin out of the hairpin as well. So the crazy thing is, you know, we're gasping at that time. I think there's still time in it as well, which is a crazy prospect. But yeah, great lap from Midnight, held it together, and you'd be arguably a madman to get bet against him right now. Nevertheless, Ballina still here. He's 4/10 off, or just under 4/10 actually. Can he find that time? We'll have to see. Meanwhile, Duncan's jumped up into second place just ahead of Ballina. George Nader up into fourth. We've got the lap times starting to crumble down right now.
I mean, I don't want to put a dampener on his lap, but I'm just trying to find any explanation to that lap. You'd have to assume that sort of it's a qualifying setup there, because that is just, not only is it 4 times out of the field, that isn't even the thing that I find surprising. It's just the fact that it's a 106.9, and as you said, even maybe a tenth or two in there still. I mean, if he goes quicker, I mean, that is insane. But, I mean, for the sake of our viewers, I hope that is a qualifying setup, but he's not quite as quick in the race, so that we actually have a battle. Because if he shows that sort of pace in the race, I mean, we might as well hand him the trophy now, really.
That would be a little bit premature, Jackson.
Fair enough. But, yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, you could say that, but the lap time is just... If he's able to go any quicker, that's insane. But I mean, that's the thing is, as always, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes there for Midnight. We don't know what he's doing. But one thing I hope we can rule out, based on that lap, is the weather. You'd have to assume that it's going to be a dry race, because that ain't no wet setup on Midnight's car. But some other drivers to look at in this session at the moment. We've got a few drivers further down the order who are yet to set a lap. Dollar Tommy, coming around the final corner there, I think he's just invalidated this one. But I believe maybe going again, I'm not certain there. But quite a few drivers as ADRT mode. Stroll has retired in the pit lane. I believe that is without even setting a lap time. That's a bit of a shocker, especially since there's still time in this session. But 4 drivers down at the bottom of the order yet to set a lap time. Both Alfa Romeo's down there at the moment, but solid driver up there at Alfa Romeo, so you'd imagine they might be able to crack their way into the top 10. Be interesting to see if anyone does deliberately try and qualify on that sort of P11, P12 sort of bubble to try and get the tyre choice around here. Because of course strategy, that is heavily in the wall for Dollar Tommy. Surprised the camera's still on it after that one. But Dollar Tommy just about making his way around the circuit. Not looking good at the moment. But still got another chance to set a lap time. He should do anyway. But all the pressure will be on that final lap as Tim Wentink now exits the pit lane for his out lap. Running driver here, very strong last season, of course got a win last season around Austria. But this season hasn't really shown the same sort of fireworks. But, you know, just going to have to wait and see. Perhaps hiding something, perhaps keeping something under wraps. But with likely, I'm guessing he's fueled for 2 runs here at the end in case he invalidates his first. Because to go out at this stage, you would assume that...
Yeah, he's got 2.8 laps of fuel in the car. Tim, is he going to stick it on pole? Shall we see? Shall we bet? Should we place the bets?
In that case, I know where my bet is going. But still top few drivers in the pit lane.
Should we follow Tim on his lap?
Would you like to commentate on it again, Alex?
With pleasure, Jackson. Here we go again then. DRS activated 200 miles an hour into turn 1, flick it left. Bit of a lock-up for Tim there. Not opening up the radius of turn 2 as much as he would have liked. Stamps up on the power now over the crest. Down into 4 and 5. Not really maximising the track limits as much as we saw from Midnight. However, to get remotely close to that lap from Midnight, I think he'd be pretty happy with. Left here, right again. This is where Karen put it in the wall not too long ago. In times gone by. Cone earlier this session as well. Let's focus our attention on the next chicane. Jumps over the curb on the right. Uses the left curb, not really maximising the track limits. That's the difference between a good lap from Tim and a great lap from what we saw from Midnight. Into the hairpin now. Not terrible rotation, not bad traction as well from Tim. That's going to give him good drive all the way down this main straight, the longest straight on the track. DRS is activated, might catch a distant slipstream from the Mercedes ahead. Now we've got one final braking zone to focus on. Flick it right, flick it left. He did invalidate that. He is fueled for another go, and that would have been a 7.9, so that would have put him 9th actually, Tim, so he would have been in contention. If he can find a bit more time, he'll have to back off on this run, You'll have to be a little bit speedy going to the line again, but he certainly can have a go. But he certainly doesn't seem like he's backing off. He's certainly pushing, but I do believe this lap is invalidated, because he had this and next lap invalidated. So,
Indeed.
So we'll have to wait, and now we should be looking at the big boys for the final couple of runs.
Yeah, that's a tough one there for Tim. That final chicane's so easy to invalidate at. It's almost easier to invalidate than it is to keep it on the track. But at the moment, driver I'm going to go look at is Midnight, who's currently invalidated his lap. So it appears he's back off to go again on his next lap. But Duncan, everyone's pretty much out on track now, apart from Scott Bugner and ADR Team Mode Stroll, who are, well, in the case of Mode Stroll, retired. Scott Bugner in the pit lane, so neither of those will set another lap. But Duncan is going to come around the final chicane now. Will he invalidate? No, he doesn't. As he begins his lap, can he take anything? Has he got anything to take the fight to Midnight? It's going to be a tough one. He's going to need a perfect lap. A small lock up there is not what he wanted. But he's got to hope that he can carry the speed through this middle sector, perhaps where Midnight made a tiny mistake or so. But it's not. It's looking quick, but we'll have to wait and see here as Sector 1. He is nearly a tenth of an 18.6. That pretty much matches Midnight's first sector. Now let's see, what can Duncan do in the middle sector? Coming through these chicanes is very tricky. He's got yellow flags here, but the car's way off the road. But could that potentially distract him? It's easily to distract someone around this track, because the margins are so fine here. As in the middle sector, that's a 39.8. That is that's me being bad at maths. I can't allow that. But I think still not quite on full pole at the moment for Duncan, as Ballina has retired from the session. Duncan through the final, and he invalidates. That sums up the qualifying session right there. But Duncan across the line and will sit P2. Midnight did not get another attempt at a lap in, unless that's a timing glitch on our side. It may well be, because it looks like Midnight's still pushing. No, I can't tell. No, it wasn't. Okay. So glitch. Oh, maybe not a glitch. It was me being stupid there. But Midnight is your pole sitter with a remarkable lap time that, for Formula EuroLeague, is quite rare to see someone purple in all three sectors, but that is exactly what Midnight has done. 3.5 tenths clear of the field. I mean, it's still, apart from that, I mean, it's very rare to see a qualifying this spread out. In Formula EuroLeague, we usually see sort of top 15 covered by a second. Today it's covered by 3 seconds, so shows how easy it is to invalidate here. I'd say that is the key to what's made it, because whilst it's a short track, unlike the short track in the form of Zandvoort, it's so incredibly easy to invalidate that a lot of these laps may have just been avoid invalidating, to put it simply, they just don't want to invalidate, and just instead just get a comfortable lap in. And also it's very easy to get traffic here as well, so perhaps that came into it for some of these drivers. But at the end of the day, Midnight hooked it up and got pole position. I should have looked then. Do you know where Midnight would have been without... Actually, I can look at it here on the task. Where would Midnight have been with his medium tyre lap? P4. Midnight would have qualified P4 on medium tyres. That... I mean... once again, I am lost for words. But yeah, we now prepare for the race, which hopefully should be another exciting one. Can Midnight hold on to that pace that he showed in qualifying, or can Duncan string it together? Penalties a big part of the race here, as we saw the invalidations in qualifying. Those will become warnings in the race, and could well change this race on its head, especially if there's a safety car in it, or perhaps a virtual safety car as well. Sort of anything that sort of mixes up the pit windows could throw a spanner in the works here, and especially a late safety car. We could see a surprise winner if there's a late safety car here because of penalties. Because if we see sort of top 5 with at least 3 seconds of penalties and the guy in 6th has none, if they then stay close enough on a late safety car, they could arguably win the race. But for now, it is Midnight who leads the field away on their formation lap. And Alex, could you run us through the grid order?
Of course, Midnight, dominant in qualifying, set one of the most impressive qualifying laps I've seen throughout my league racing career, not just as a commentator but as a racer as well. He's got to be the pick for the win today from pole. However, let's not forget, over the last sort of couple of races, Midnight has had a tendency to pick up a penalty here or there. So if he repeats that today, and as you said, Jackson, he gets hit with a late safety car, things could go very backwards very quickly for the AlphaTauri. Nevertheless, he's on pole, let's deal with the present, and if, as you said, if he keeps up the pace he showed in qualifying, then I don't think anyone's going to be able to. Turn 1 is probably the last we'll see of him. But, you know, we're going to remain hopeful. Maybe Duncan, Ballina, or someone else can bring an interesting challenge. Talking about them, they are the top 3. George Nader slots in 4th, the 3rd row, filled by Bandini and Lars Kramner. Would have liked to get closer to his teammate, I assume. Desso and Cone 7th and 8th. Cone only 8th after that crash earlier on in qualifying. Luckily, didn't lose his wheel. Elting and VR Mergelit take up the 5th row, and it's the Mercedes of TL44S and Scott Bugner 11th and 12th, followed by Harry B and ADRT Mode Stroll in 14th. Tim Wenting down all the way in 15th, Dollar Tommy 16th, and Shizou Joey all the way at the back in 17th. The bottom 3 didn't set a lap in qualifying, let's bear that in mind. And the bottom 3 are also joining up to their grid spots now. And we're going to get the Canadian Grand Prix underway.
As the final couple of cars line up on the grid, they are now all in position. Midnight at the front of the field. Alongside him is Duncan. But who will take the trophy home today? 5 red lights. And we are racing in Canada. Midnight gets a solid launch there, and can he get ahead of Duncan before they get to turn 1? Yes, he can. And he's leader going through the first couple of corner series. There's battling further down the order. Duncan slots in behind there, so does Ballina as they watch on. George Nader is having to fend off one of the Alfa Romeos there, as Lars Kramer looks to have lost. I'm sorry, there's a slight timing glitch here. Yep, there is. But that's, I believe, Lars Kramer battling with FBR Bandini as they go through these tight chicanes here. It's easy to get pushed wide on these corners here as there's a big pack of cars battling away. As there's only 3 wide going into the chicane. Lars Kramer has to cut the chicane then. And that's all in the wall. That's FBR Bandini, who has got into the wall there, and he's dropping down the order quickly. And is outside of the top 10 and down the order. And looks like they're going to back out and go to the back of the field. But Midnight does lead the field away on lap 1 after a fantastic getaway. Duncan Ballina, George Nader and Lars Kramer sitting behind. But of all of those, Lars Kramer is looking the most vulnerable. Alex, what did you think of that lap 1?
Yeah, big damage for Bandini. He did a smart thing to back out, and he's going to go into the pits now, so that's his race pretty much run without a safety car. Mode Stroll pits as well, so he must have had contact with Joey, who's also further down the pits. Mode Stroll retires in the pit lane. Joey is also going to come into the pits. We might see him follow suit, but back to the front. Midnight leading away, starting to stretch his legs. 7/10 is the gap between himself and Duncan behind. Ballina keeping Duncan very honest. We've already got a 3-second time penalty for Scott Bugner, really emphasising how easy it is to get warnings and subsequently penalties around the track. Further down, Tim Wenting's had a great start, down from 15th on the grid all the way up to 10th. He's side by side with Dessa now, trying to make that 9th. He's going to go down the inside of the chicane. They make a bit of contact. They both cut the chicane. Tim Wenting makes that move. Oh, I'm not sure if the stewards will have an inquiry into that, but for now, it's Tim Wenting ahead of Dessa.
That was an interesting one there from Tim. Both of them basically picking the track of their choice going through that chicane. As Dollar Tommy now is on the back of Dessa as they head towards the chicane. What can Dollar Tommy do here? It looks like they're going to sit behind and wait for now, which around Canada is often the correct decision. And a lot of cars tapping the barriers there. It doesn't look like anyone's picked up too much of a hit there, as Duncan's at the fast lap on this occasion. And perhaps starting to put the pressure on Midnight, because as he said, Midnight definitely could get warnings today, and definitely could get penalties, because at the end of the day, whilst one lap pace is fantastic, and in general race pace is fantastic, everyone is vulnerable to penalties. Some are better than others, but I'm sure Duncan will be doing absolutely everything he can as he throws a bit of dirt there to push Midnight into making those small mistakes, because around Canada it is so easy to get those warnings, and for penalties, as Lars Kramer gets a 3-second time penalty, a lot of the time it is just a matter of time before you get a penalty. So there's yellow flags, and that is TL44S, and that's a massive crash, and that is Harry B out of the race.
Harry.
That could be a safety, and it is a safety car.
Yes. I believe that Scott Bugner involved, yes, Scott Bugner as well involved. Front wing damage for him, front wing damage also for TL44S, sorry. They'll both need to pit. Harry B, unfortunately, can't make his way back to the pits, so this is good for Bandini and Joey's going to close them back up. I don't think it's going to change too much. Having said that, Midnight, Duncan, Ballina, George Nader all pit. We've got following on. We've got everyone in the pits. Cone, Elting, Muglet, Tim Wenting, Dollar Tommy, Deso F1.
Duncan gets the sorry to drop. Duncan has taken the lead in the pit lane. Duncan has taken the lead. Other than Lars, who has stayed out, Duncan now leads the race. Sorry to interrupt you there, Alex, but Duncan has passed Midnight in the pit lane. That is mixed things up. But it's Silverstone all over again on early pit stops, isn't it, Alex?
Midnight getting held up by, I believe it was a Haas, and it must have been George Nader who held up Midnight, and, well, the Racing Point team crew said thanks very much, we'll release our driver. There's the provisional lead. Let's not forget, the one driver Duncan probably didn't want to see in front of him would be the teammate of the guy behind him. So I'm not sure if Lars is going to play any games. Let's not forget these tyres are only about 2.5 laps old, given the qualifying lap. Let's call it 3.5, given the probably 3 laps of racing. Call it 4 if we want to be pedantic. I've got a small glitch where I can't see the laps, so sort of relying on the tyre graphic. But these softs will still have performance in them, and they still will be quicker than the medium tyres, even though they're fresh. So Lars, you know, we could expect him to pull a little bit of a gap on the likes of Duncan and Midnight behind, who will surely go to battle and contest P2, what will effectively end up being the lead of the race, which I can't wait to see. Ballina has maintained his position in 4th, even though that Mercedes pit box is probably the worst place to be if you've got everyone diving into the pits, because that's where you all get held up. But Ballina, whether it was lucky or not, he's kept that position. We got a few cars pitting again. Bandini in the pits, Dollar Tommy in the pits. Both these drivers, both the Alfa Romeos, were on the hard tyres. Bandini arguably didn't have a choice other than go to the hards because he pit on lap 1 after that contact. But Dollar Tommy did choose to go to them medium tyres, to them hard tyres, I should say. Clearly the wrong strategy call, and he's opted to just match the rest of the field and go for the mediums, as has Bandini.
Yeah, I mean, they'll have a bit slightly fresher tyres, but I doubt that'll make much of a difference in the race at this stage anyway. But to give an idea, I believe, I mean, this can't be right. No, it must be right. I believe the tyre wear on Lars's car is worse than 27%, is what I'm reading here. And that is his rear left. Rear is significantly more worn than the fronts, which are both below 20. Rear is both above 25. But I mean, as you said earlier, that it's the rears that really get eaten up around this track. And I mean, if Lars can get a good restart, then who knows what he can do. But I think it's going to need a bit of a strategy masterclass here from Lars to get himself back into the fight. Because even if he does manage to pull a bit of a gap, when he pits, he's going to drop right back into that group of cars. So who knows, as the safety car is in this lap.
Well, here we go then. Lars is going to lead us away. And he can sit there as long as he wants. The only rule he has to... There's 2 rules he has to abide by now. No harsh accelerating and then braking. When he goes, he goes. But he doesn't have to go all the way up until the start-finish line. And he can't catch the safety car before safety car line 1, also known as the pit lane. So we're going to wait. And I can confirm the pit lane is already past that first safety car line. So Lars is now waiting. One advantage he does have, softer tyres, lower operating temperature. So the likes of everyone behind him on the medium tyres, they're going to struggle for temperature a bit more than he is maybe. He's still holding the pack up, well, he's still weaving.
We've
got some contact, and we do have contact. It's scenes of Mugello all over again. I'm not sure if anyone was at fault there, or it's just a backup effect.
I don't know what I can take from this, but Lars, his throttle went to full and then slammed the brake back on. Now maybe it wasn't for long enough for it to actually cause that stack up, but that's going to be looked into after the race. There's quite a few drivers here who have come out of that, and
there's Midnight having a go. Midnight is having a go, and he's gone round the outside of Duncan. Little bit of oversteer, that opens the door for Ballina. He's going to slide back up the inside. These two drivers side by side. Midnight does back out. Midnight has gone from second to fourth. Or, sorry, third to fourth, I should say, in the space of a couple of corners. Duncan now challenging his rival's teammate for the lead of the race. Lars comes off the inside. He's very deep into the hairpin, locks up Duncan with a switchback. They're going to be side by side. Midnight having another go on Ballina here.
Midnight 25% damage.
Yes, there was a front wing.
Midnight 25% damage. I don't know how it's happened, but he's got it. And Duncan does take the lead here on track. That's still wheel to wheel behind his own contact. Midnight straight on and into the pit lane there, as that was nearly a bit of contact there between himself. And he retires. The pole sitter retires from the race. I mean, I didn't see that one coming. Did you, Alex?
No, it's all unraveled for Midnight. I still think he could have got some points today, but wow, yeah. Championship leader as well, I believe.
Yeah, that could change everything, especially with Duncan out front now. Duncan hasn't had the best of seasons, but it's still any points will help here. And Duncan found himself in a great position now because he's ahead of Lars. And I mean, I can't believe drivers have retired in the pits this early in the race. It's Canada, for God's sake. There's going to be more safety cars. Oh, that's very one. Oh, Ballina nearly into the wall. George Nader's going to fly past him now. As George Nader, who I believe has not had. Oh, that's Ballina sending it back up the inside. What is going on today? These drivers, what are they doing? Ballina, credit to him, it was a brave move, but that was aggression at its limit then. But
we've seen Ballina get his elbows out before. The elbows were very much so out there, but this carnage almost at the start of the Canadian Grand Prix opens up an opportunity for an outsider podium. Could we see George Nader, Kai Elting as well fighting back from a poorer qualifying? He hasn't had the pace that we've seen from him in days gone by, but Lars starting to hold up the cars behind him. But look at the gap between Duncan and himself. 1.7 seconds separates first and second, and Duncan, I'm sure, is enjoying this fresh air out front.
I mean, I think all of these drivers in the field would love to be a few cars further up the road where Duncan is at the moment, because he's not only has he got the fresh air on his nose, but he's got essentially a wall behind him in the form of Lars Kramer, who has got these tyres that are clearly not performing well. But credit to Lars, he's doing a fantastic defensive job at the moment, as has Kai. Going to be oversteer, it looks like he's safe from behind. I am watching this from on board from Kai at the moment, as they do go as well as they go on board with George Nader here. I like Lars Kramer has got confidence on the brake.
Scott Bunya's had a go. Scott Bunya down the inside of cone. Sorry to cut you off there, Jackson. Very ambitious. As one Haas got overtaken into the hairpin the lap before, one lap later, the other Haas has a go. Scott Bunya buried well inside the points now, as Ballina has got past Lars Kramer round the outside of the Wall of Champions chicane, and he's up into second. Lars Kramer still third. Kai Elting now makes a move for fourth position, round the outside, turns into the inside for turn number one. They're still side by side. Bit of a shove there from the McLaren. It's clean, it's on the limit, but it's certainly clean. They're still going to be side by side up the crest. We've got a right-hander coming up. George Nader has the inside line. Kai Elting has to back out. Great battle between them two, and this will be the battle for the final spot on the podium once Lars pits. And Joey's gone off. Where's he gone off?
Safety car, safety car, safety car, safety car. Another safety car out.
And 9 laps into the race, we've got 10 drivers left. It's like Demolition Derby here.
There's more carnage than there was in Tier 2 last week, and I think we only had 10 cars finished. In the last car, I think, actually, if I remember, 10 cars finished in Tier 2 last week. But that was still, like, the final few cars retired at about 10, 15 laps, like, with pretty less than 10 laps to go. And we're seeing this happen less than 10 laps in. I mean, someone tell these drivers to take it, like, just chill a bit, you know? They need to calm themselves. It's a 35 lap race, not a 10 lap sprint. These guys clearly getting a bit confused at these early stages of the race. But will anyone pit? I doubt that. Lars Kramer, I assume, would. Yes, indeed he does. But this is where I think back to those that retired in the pits. I mean, Midnight, I know for sure was one of them. Mode Stroll, another. I mean, everyone that retired in the pits, you're looking like a bit of an idiot now. Because, as another safety car, you could have easily got back into the fight for this race. And how this race has gone so far, I wouldn't say, even if you're FBR Bandini at the back of the pack at the moment, even if you're in his position, still, you've got to shout with this win here. Because whilst Duncan and Ballon and George Lane look rapid out front, with the amount of safety cars we're seeing, I don't think anyone's going to be able to pull a gap. And if this keeps up, like, we're running out of cars to crash. You'd assume the safety car will get less common, because there'll be less cars available to crash. But I mean, this track, it's almost like Monaco in the sense that around here, you make a mistake, you're going to be in the wall. And it's strange to see this much carnage this early in the race. I could understand it maybe a bit later in the race when there's more on the line, but at this stage, when there's still 25 laps to go, I mean, simply put it, like, there is no way. They're acting like it's the final lap of the race on every lap of the race. And that's something that you don't see at this level. And whilst as a commentator's perspective, this is a joy to watch, on a real level, this isn't a good sort of showing. These guys, like, credit to the guys that are still in the race, especially those that, like FBR Bandini, who have had damage in this race, but have continued, not given up. Whereas there's others that have had the slightest bit of wing damage and given up just like that. And that's where my respect to these guys goes. I respect anyone that doesn't give up, essentially. Even if you're a lap down, if you then don't give up, I get more respect for you, as a few more drivers pitting further down the order here, as that is Scott Bogner and TL44S, sorry. But, I mean, you've got to credit these guys, they're doing a good job here. It's interestingly, Scott Bogner, Deso F1, Scott Bogner and TL44S, I think they might all be trying to go to the end here, you know, which would be an interesting strategy that would definitely mix things up. But out of those three drivers, only one of them doesn't have penalties, and that is Deso. It seems like this race is still very much all to play for.
Well, we could have three drivers still in the race and it'll still be to play for.
That's very true.
But arguably be less to play for, and I hope we've seen the last of the retirements, but because the idea of a 10-driver shootout is quite enticing. One thing I have noticed, you know, we got Deso, Bunya, and TL44S all on hard tyres. They're going to go to the end.
Yeah,
Duncan, Ballona, George, Elting, Cohn, Kramer, and Bandini all can't make the end, surely.
I think Deso F1 here has played a blinder here, because he now has to focus on not getting penalties and not getting damage. Because if he can just avoid it all, and when they pit, rotate into the front here, as it's a very slow restart, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys in the mid-pack get flashbacks here if they see the field slowing down. But Deso F1 here, him and Duncan looking like two drivers that could end up here a bit like, perhaps this could end up being a bit of a Hungary 2019 or a Spain 2021 situation.
No spoilers.
That's all I'm saying. We won't say who came out on top. Of course, we know who came out on top in 2019. But Duncan has gone now before the chicane here, much earlier. That may have caught some of them off guard because he's got a big gap here.
Oh, bit big of a slide from Duncan. He did well to catch that. I thought he was going to end up in the exit wall, similar to Magnussen in qualifying back in 2019. Nevertheless, you know, we're back racing again. Finally, we've had 2 safety car periods in 12 laps. Let's hope that's the final and we can, you know, get pushing to the end of the race. Meanwhile, Scott Bunya has made a move on Dessa there. That is only provisional due to penalties. So let's see how this race unfolds. I think we've got a really cracking race on our hands, despite losing 7 drivers already.
That is very true. I mean, this level of attrition is something you don't see very often. But, I mean, it's nice to have one of these races now and again. Of course, you don't want to see 7 drivers retiring every week. But now and again, you need a race like this. That's like an Austria 2020. Or a Germany 2019. Like one of those races where we see carnage, we see lots of retirements, and it gives us those surprises. And today, with those like Scott Bogner, Deso F1, and TL44S, we could definitely see that sort of surprise result. However, at the moment, they are dropping back and quickly. As is Lars and Cohn going wheel to wheel into the chicane forward. I must admit, I hold my breath every time I see cars go wheel to wheel into that final chicane. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really look like it's built for 2 cars. It struggles with 1 sometimes, so I do worry a lot when I see cars go battling into there, but it appears that most of the drivers that have found themselves in the barrier today, those that have kept themselves at the barrier, appear to be showing how they've managed that with clean racing. But still, a long way to go, and I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we see another safety car today, because with racing as crazy as this, I just don't see it ending, but who knows, as Duncan on the verge of getting that 1 second gap out front at the moment. George Nader with a penalty, but still looking decent on pace at the moment, putting the pressure really on Ballina, which is nice respect for George Nader here, because these are not true drivers that usually say are battling each other on a regular basis. To see George Nader putting the pressure on Ballina, it's a breath of fresh air, because that's one of the reasons I love racing. It's that it's never what you expect. After qualifying, I was ready to give the winner's trophy to Midnight, and he's now sitting 12th and parked up in the pit lane. So that's what I love about this sport, is that it's never over until that checkered flag flies, and in the case of some races, even after the checkered flag, it's still not over. But I mean, it's fantastic to watch this. And whilst Duncan now appears to be the favourite, I don't want to say that we'll hand him the trophy now, because we saw what that did to Midnight. So Duncan at the moment looking strong, but it's still, those on the hards definitely could spring a surprise here. However, they could be their own worst enemy, because it appears they're starting to fight within each other, and are really starting to drop back from the pack. So I'd have to say at their current pace, they're not going to be contending. They might get ahead in the pit window, but I doubt they can stay there, as that's Lars Kramer and Kyle Elting battling away here for 4th position. Two drivers here that push to the limit. These guys very much on the edge of grip always, but Lars has the DRS down the straight, which meant Kyle Elting could do nothing about him, as Deso F1 does repass Scott Bunner. Scott gets a big slide coming out of that chicane, and Deso F1 using all of the ERS and DRS that he has to his ability there, and he has taken that P7, which is almost the net lead in a way, but even if that does end up being the lead, we don't know how long that'll last. Scott Bugnet has now got 3 seconds, so has Kyle Elting. I might pop up penalties, because I thought that's something that's going to come into things, especially later in the day, as FDR Bandini on those medium tyres, starting to make his way up the order, as Ballina now crucially has a 3 second time penalty.
Yeah, that was at the second chicane. I've been riding on board with George Nader. George looking very comfortable running at this pace. Lars Kramer, sorry. I can't pronounce things on this Sunday evening, but yeah, Lars Kramer on them fresher tyres, going along quite nicely, not in any rush to make any moves. I don't think anyone in the top 4, or really top 4, as Elting starts to lose a bit of ground. He's coming under pressure from Cone through the final couple of corners. No one in the top 4 really in a rush to make any move. Nevertheless, as you see Lars, that's sort of confirmation of his pace. But one thing I'm a little bit concerned about Deso's pace, you know. He probably will end up in the lead of the race when everyone pits, including Lars. But I don't think he'll have the pace on them hard tyres to maintain it, because he's already dropped 5 seconds to Elting. And in terms of his gap to the leader, he's already 8 seconds off the lead. And a stop here is about 18 seconds. It's a much shorter pit lane, given the fact you cut turn 1, so yeah, you can lose as little as 17 seconds in a pit lane, which is much shorter than any other track. So Deso, I think the dream of the win might be off, but you know, nevertheless, we could have many more twists and turns in the road before we get to the checkered flag. Meanwhile, talking about twists and turns, is that a move from Lars Kramer? It is, down the inside of the hairpin, I presume, into P3?
Yes, very much a Verstappen Imola / Spain style, Hamilton Portugal style corner exit there. I don't know why I've committed to sort of comparing it to a Grand Prix today. I don't know why, but yeah, very much on the exit. Decided that room was not to be given, but you know, George Nader backed out of it fairly and slot in behind. It wasn't. I mean, George Nader was barely alongside, so he definitely wasn't entitled to the space. But that could have ended very badly. I've seen many a crash on the exit of the hairpin. Not usually a place you'd think of crashes, but I have seen them happen there, just because of sort of the stack up that you can get on the exit there. Something I've noticed on the task system is that it says Balor only has 2 warnings, yet he has a penalty. Have you encountered this before?
Could be sometimes the game gives a glitch where you get 2 warnings when it should be 1, but it gives out 2, and that's the only logical explanation I can concoct. But if it is removable, it will get removed. You know, the drivers can report that. But talking about reporting things, I'm going to do my best weather reporter impression. Is it looking a bit cloudy over the circuit de Gilles Villeneuve? Not so much.
With, Lars,
yeah, not so much through the first sector, but I certainly noticed at the hairpin it looked a little bit cloudy. Meanwhile, Cohn picks up a time penalty, but he has got ahead of Kyle Elting. We've only got 3 drivers in the field without a penalty, that being Bandini, who pits this lap. So he is currently racing for the wooden spoon, and he's going to make what is presumably his last pit stop of the day.
You would assume so, yes.
A fresh front wing as well.
On the topic of warnings, Duncan has none, which perhaps explains why he hasn't broken away from this pack as we perhaps may have expected. I mean, I say it as if I did expect it. I didn't at all. Balor was fairly, as Balor off the road there, and that would be his 3rd warning. And now he does legitimately have 3 warnings, as that has also given Lars the chance. I must say, Lars isn't, I would say not conserving is an understatement. He's not really looked at his ERS, I don't think. He's just pressing the button and hoping it'll go, because he's not got much left in the tank on that side of things. Balor with significantly more, which should keep him ahead down this straight. But Duncan with absolutely no warning so far, so that could play very much into his advantage later in this race. Only other drivers with no warnings are no one. That's a quick answer. No one else has no warnings. So that that's some pitting here for George Nader and Cohn, which now puts F1 up into 5th position. So let's see how this goes. Looking at tyre wear at the moment, I'm seeing why Lars is so quick at the moment. That's because he's got about 15%, maybe 15 to 20% less tyre wear than the drivers in front of him. Now I can't actually see boundless tyre wear, but Duncan is almost at 50%, whereas Lars is only just at 30%. So if Balon has similar tyre wear to Duncan at the moment, we can very much assume that Lars will be making these positions soon. But, I mean, either way, with the tyre wear or not, Lars' pace so far has been very impressive and has broken that gap to those behind by quite a bit. Adds Balon into the pits and is triggering the undercut. Interesting to see Lars stays out here. I think Lars is actually quite happy to run in the open air behind Duncan now. Because he's got the tyre wear, he can go a little bit longer, as Kyle I think is also into the pits now. But he's got sort of that grip, so I think he'd be happy with a bit more of a gap in front of him, I would imagine. But Deso Fun in 3rd, currently about 9 seconds off the lead. He's going to come out in the lead, I think that's no question. But as you said earlier, I think it's fair to say that will be a short-term gain, and in the long term he will be falling down the order. Scott Bugner has another 3-second time penalty. That takes him up to 15, so interesting application of track limits there by him. As actually noticing now, he does actually have a little bit of damage, so perhaps that's contributing to it. As I believe he may have let his teammate through then. I believe he did, because he... I mean, I'd be maybe wrong there, I pretty am. But I believe he did let his teammate George Nader through. George Nader quite a big undercut here. And Balliner has come out behind him. So George Nader in a very strong position here. As he's now also going to pass the hard-running car of TL44S, or at least he's going to try to. As Duncan comes into the pit lane, Lars stays out again. George Nader flies past there. I mean, I would assume ERS was involved. Looking at the numbers, I would... yeah, does look like there's ERS involved here. Now, will George Nader hop up into 2nd position? Net second, 3rd position, I should say, because of Deso F1. And indeed he is. Actually, no, it's going to be close. Duncan is going to come out... Well, actually, will Duncan be behind Balor? It's going to be close here for this one. They're going to be wheel to wheel coming out of the pit exit. Oh, a bit of a wobble there. Four Scott Bugner in front of them. 3 wide
Three
going
wide!
into the chicane. This can only end badly. And they've survived, and Ballina comes out on top. And I think Scott was a bit flustered there when he saw the 2 leaders of the race either side of him. But yeah, that, I mean... I mean... Crazy pit window we've had so far. I said around Canada we can have quite a wide pit window due to the general sort of tyre wear situation here. But what are your thoughts on George Nader at the moment? Of course he's got the penalties, of which I believe 5 may be potentially for a contact on one of those restarts under safety car, so perhaps that wasn't necessarily a legitimate penalty. But what are your thoughts at the moment on George Nader's pace, Alex?
Yeah, he sat well, pulled the undercut. If you can keep them tyres alive, then it's going to be tricky for him with the penalty. Let me just check his penalty. Actually, he does have 8 seconds, so I think you were right with saying that one penalty under the safety car as a result of that Mugello-style crash. I believe that would be an unfair penalty. The stewards will look into it, and I assume it will get removed. So let's go with that. Ballina with 6 seconds of penalties, though. So George with, let's say, effectively 3, because we don't like to trust the safety car penalties. But Duncan, as you said, sat very pretty on no penalties whatsoever. So he's in a good position, Duncan. But I have to say, yeah, George pulled the undercut very well. It's strong around this track, and he proved it. He's now going to get his head down and close up to Desso F1. He should be on the back of Desso in the next sort of 3 or 4 laps, as Desso will probably expectedly drop through the field like a bit of a stone. So maybe it's not a bad idea for him to take soft tyres at the end of this race. He can probably afford to pit onto the soft tyres in about 3 or 4 laps or so. Nevertheless, it's nice to see him out in front, and a bit of a change of faces, and maybe he could be on for a really good result today if things go his way and he can find some pace in this final stint. But for now, he's got the likes of George Nader, VRT Ballina, VSR Duncan, Lars Kramer, all coming at him, and Lars, who come out in 5th, is right on the back of Duncan now. I think we're about to see a battle between Duncan and Ballina, because Duncan can't afford just to sit back and let Ballina close him up to the likes of George and Desso and rely on his penalty to keep him alive, as George Nader gets another penalty, so that's even better news for Duncan. But speaking of Duncan, he can't just let Ballina pull him along and rely on his penalty, because he's got Lars right up his gearbox now. So Lars, if he sees an opportunity, if he sniffs blood, he's going to go for it. Can he smell blood just yet? He can't, he sticks behind. So yeah, Duncan, although he's got no penalties, he's going to have to keep wary and keep his alert signs well and truly on for any attack from Lars behind.
Around here, going side by side is always a risk. Battling in general is a risk around this track, because of how close the walls are. So Duncan's best opportunity almost is, if Lars goes for it, is almost to let him through, because he'd have to sort of roll the dice there, and just hope that he can stay in the DRS, because battling around here is such a big risk. And when you're in a position like he is at the moment, where as long as he keeps it on the tarmac, he's looking set for the win. He doesn't need to risk it really. As Cohen now sets the fast lap of the race. As I mean, yes, we've got some big names out of this race. Midnight, of course, being the biggest of them all. But it's still, when Ballina and Duncan are still in this thing, we're still seeing a lot of names here that we wouldn't usually see up a sort of sharp end of the grid. As Cohen is making his way towards this group of cars. Got a bit of a gap there, about 5 seconds, 5.5 seconds. But it's still not impossible as migrating host. Kyle, I think, has lagged out. Do you think you can send him an invite?
Yeah, I'll sort him that just now.
Thank you very much. But I think if Cohen can keep up this pace, perhaps he could get a bit close to this leading group. But at the moment, George Nader is taking the lead of the Canadian Grand Prix away from Desso F1. We knew that was an inevitable move, but George Nader into the chicane has it done down the straight, and Desso F1 drops into 2nd position as his tyres fade. These hard tyres nowhere near as grippy as those lovely soft medium tyres. But Ballina will now be the next car that has to pass Desso F1. It's going to be interesting to see if he can make that move without losing the position to Duncan and Lars Pine. Because it's so easy to go for a move here, back out of it, and then find another car passing you. And that's often when the collisions happen, is because you end up battling a car you didn't realise you were going to battle. As Bandini and others get into ninth place ahead of Kyle, I think he was sadly lagged out from the race. Shame to see there. He wasn't on for a top sort of 5, but still looking. I mean, with 10 cars left in the race, everyone was looking good for points, but still sort of looking for a good pool of points for his championship challenge. I believe he may actually have picked up some damage at some point, and yes, he did. So that's a shame to see. But up front now, George Mader has to try and just go full power until the end of this race and hope, as Ballina had another penalty. I'm going to bring penalties back up because I think this is going to be the thing that changes everything. As that's Lars not going for the move there into turn 1, he's just so close to the back of Duncan. It's almost painful to see him back out of them, but still, it is. It's a shame.
It's important that George got past Desso when he did, because that put a car in between himself and Ballina behind. And I don't think Ballina's going to be able to make a move right now. He's pretty marginal for ERS is the Mercedes, so he's going to have to try and make a move on the next DRS straight. Maybe he'll send one down the inside of the hairpin. It looks a little bit too far back for now, and that would be very ambitious from Ballina, but it certainly looks a bit cloudy. I don't think whether it's really going to affect that race. Big slide from Ballina here. But let's not forget, this is for position, so Desso, I don't think he's just going to pull to the side and wave these by. He doesn't make it too hard.
He is waving them by. You've commentator cursed that at the finest. He's literally pulled over to the side and waved them by. You could not have predicted that worse. Oh, commentator. It's not even a curse. That's, yeah.
Arguably smart from Desso. You know, he was only going to lose time, so.
Oh, it appears Alex's race engineering days are not in front of him.
Yeah, no, I'll stick to commentating. But Scott picks up another penalty. That means his total's up to 24. And if I can do the maths correctly, that is 2 penalties off a disqualification. So he's got to be careful on the last couple of laps. I don't know how he's managed to pick up 24 seconds worth of penalties. That is 7 separate penalties, which means 24 separate warnings. So that's impressive from Scott, setting the record books alight today. And he is pushing on after TL44S on the road. However, I'm not really sure he's going to catch him, pass him, and then put 18 seconds into him, but arguably stranger things have happened. Meanwhile, Duncan makes an easy move on Ballina into the wall of champion chicane, or before that even, breezed past with DRS, and I think Ballina's starting to struggle with his energy now, because he's got the threat of Lars behind him now as we enter lap number 28.
So yeah, as things stand, Duncan is currently in a position to win this race. All he has to do is almost hold position. He doesn't need to even get any closer to George Mader. He's quite happy to sit in this gap at the moment. But as I said earlier, Lars, with his slightly fresher tyres, is definitely a threat, and could potentially push Duncan into making a mistake. Because whilst Duncan doesn't really need to push, you can never stop pushing in a field as competitive as this. You always have to be pushing 100%. Which is, of course, a big risk here. I'm going to quickly check warning situation. Warning situation 1 for Duncan now, so he's still well safer than the rest of them. But who knows? Especially if we start to see some battling, he may have to push harder than he wants to, and that can always result in some penalties. I often personally find when I'm running in clear air around here, I find it fairly simple to avoid penalties. But as soon as you get tucked up behind the gearbox of another car, which Duncan could well be behind George Nader soon, it's almost like that sort of throws you off a bit. But especially if that driver then makes a mistake in front of you and you follow their line, it's much easier to collect those warnings when tucked underneath someone else. So he's got to be careful. But at the moment, it's fair to say Duncan is in the driving seat of this race. But still, George Nader putting in an outstanding job. George Nader at the moment, his main rival being that of Lars Kramer. Speaking of whom, where's Ballina gone? Ballina appears to have got confused going over the chicane and has lost the position to Lars. I don't know, perhaps there's some contact there, I'm not sure. But Ballina there does go wide at the chicane and loses the position to Lars Kramer, releasing him to hunt down the top two. Now, whilst Lars has no real reason to overtake Duncan because of the penalties, he does have a reason to overtake George Nader. So perhaps Lars, knowing that, is going to push and try and get both Duncan, maybe almost have to overtake Duncan to get George Nader. In which case that could throw a spanner in the works for Duncan. But when Duncan can catch and pass George Nader and sort of just be sort of cleanly and pull off into the distance, he'll be perfectly fine. They won't have any worries at all. Because even if someone does catch them, there's not much point in them overtaking them. And whilst that doesn't mean they won't try, it means that in the event they do try, Duncan can wave them through and say, okay, you take the lead, I'm happy to sit behind you. So, at the moment, it is definitely Duncan in control of this race, but as we've seen so many times this season, no matter how sure you are a driver is going to win it, it can all be flipped on its head. For example, in Silverstone.
Of course. Wheel disconnections. Is that a little bit of commentator's curse? I'm sure the drivers will be willing to shut up now.
Well, Duncan, I believe, was one of the drivers who did have it that day. However, that was, I feel, sort of more of a one-day issue, I'm hoping, anyway, for those drivers' sake. Because there's about 4 drivers that I know of that had that issue on that day at that time. So, you'd hope that there's no such issue now. But it's still, it's not over till it's over. However, with 4.5 laps to go in this thing, Duncan looking strong as the field has started to spread out a tad bit. But with penalties, mass is going to come into the results here as Duncan does now get the DRS of George Nader. I believe that is Kyle Elting's AI car just up the road. I would assume now that Kyle Elting chose to leave, perhaps because of the damage. But as things stand, Duncan hunting down George Nader. George Nader managed to get a bit of DRS on this occasion due to the lapped car of Kyle Elting. Let's wait and see. Will he get it? Yes, he will. So that'll put Duncan off for another lap or two. But Duncan still... I would say I could be more clear that Duncan has got to do basically nothing. As it's raining, it is raining. It's like tier 2. Rain? It's raining. It's like FEL
Ballina
tier 2.
In the pits. Ballina pits.
I mean, too soon for Inters. Way too soon for Inters, and he obviously isn't going for Inters.
It's a new nose. It's a new nose and softs. New nose and softs.
I doubt it was going to go Inters, but I feel like he was perhaps going to go for fast slap, which has now been sort of thrown down the drain. But yeah, this is in development here. We had rain about this stage of the race, and whilst the first sort of couple of laps weren't really, so you didn't really notice it, so the final 2 laps of the race, you really were sort of sliding around. But I mean, this is going to be interesting now. Duncan even less. Oh, I'm going to stay on board here with Duncan now for next maybe a lap or two, and just see what it's like from a driver's perspective. As Ballina gets another penalty today.
He's struggling, isn't he? And that's going to drop him penalty-wise behind his teammate ahead and Cone. So he's going to have to catch and pass both of them, and then put a good amount of seconds through both of them. Nevertheless, though, we do have Duncan closing up to the back of George Nader. We do expect that, especially with that another time penalty for Duncan. We do expect we do expect Duncan to get the win of this race, but Deso F1 as well could be on for a podium. He's got no warning, he's got no penalties, and the car ahead of him, Lars Kramer, 5.5 seconds ahead, has a 6-second penalty, so let's keep an eye on that in the final couple of laps.
Yeah, that is going to be a very interesting one to watch. It's not over yet for Deso, but you've got to say those hard tyres tend to be the weakest tyre in the wet conditions, or even in the damp conditions, because they require they require more heat than the soft and the medium tyre. So that could potentially put them at a disadvantage in this late stage, especially with the wear as well. So as things stand, Deso dropping back, but however, it's still if Lars Kramer gets enough of a warning, perhaps, especially in these sort of conditions, it's very easy to get a few more warnings in these conditions. Perhaps it could open up the door for a Desso podium. And I say this, George Nader and Lars Kramer both one penalty away from giving Desso F1 the position, which is a shocker, but it just shows how well Desso F1 has done. He's so intelligent, just the intelligent choices he made when racing the other drivers. It was very smart of him to make the decisions he did, and so far it appears to be working well for him. Whilst it might not give him that podium that he would have loved, it could still get him. I mean, P4 is still a very strong drive today, and a mistake from George Nader or from Lars Kramer could hand that podium away. And if they both make a mistake, it's potentially a P2 for Desso F1, who at some point in this race probably didn't see that one coming, as Ballina gets past his teammate. Unsurprisingly, those softs working very well in these conditions. Of course, not as good as they would have done on the dry, but compared to the other compounds, they're doing very well. Let's see, now that's where we get a good idea of what Duncan's plan is. He's got a lot of ERS. He's using it. Is he going to attempt the pass? Yes, he is. He's going to try and pass George Nader for the lead here. He wants to win this one on track, and he's going to take the lead. And Duncan now leads on track, not only on penalties. So Duncan just showing the speed that he's shown all day long, and takes the helm of the race once more. Alex, what have you got to say about Duncan's drive today?
Yeah, I was just gonna chirp in there. Great job from Duncan, great move. The move was coming anyway, but like any racing driver, you want to do it on track. You want to be the first to cross the checkered flag, and he's done that. And no commentators curse, and I'm really sorry if anything happens. But Duncan on course to win this race. It's a grave shame we haven't had Midnight to join this battle. I think this race, if we'd had another 5-10 more laps, would the rain have been more of a prominent feature? Potentially, but it looks like Desso is not going to pick up a podium. Nevertheless, fourth from where he started outside the points is a very solid effort. Ballina's strategy hasn't worked. He's going to drop back behind his teammate as a result of penalties, maybe even behind Bandini as well. I'm not sure. We'll have to see when the penalty system works itself out, but Duncan has been absolutely formidable today. He's done everything right. He took the lead on the final lap of the race, and he wins in Canada. Duncan crosses the line. George Nader comes home second. That will become third when Lars crosses the line, and we're going to wait for Desso, who's going to hold off Cone on the road. Racing Point get two cars in the top 5, and Desso does jump onto the podium. Instead of Lars, it's George Nader he replaces. So George couldn't keep it clean enough, but let's not forget George is due a 5-second removal as a result of contact under the safety car, resulting in an unfair penalty. So let's just remember that these results are completely provisional, but a race of attrition, Jackson, resulted in just 10 finishes.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very crazy race, and I mean, to be fair to the field, they didn't. We ended with 10, but that sort of they didn't lose anymore after about lap 10. So credit to those that managed to survive all 35 laps, because those that did have managed to survive 25 more than anyone else. So fantastic job by anyone that finishes the race, because clearly today was a race of attrition. But Duncan stands on the top step of the podium, and well, puts in a drive that it's hard to discredit. It was a outstanding drive, avoiding penalties throughout, and really brought this one home. Now, Alex, I know you have to go, but could you invite the podium drivers before you go?
Yep, I'll send them an invite. Other than that, it's been a pleasure yet again. A different race to what we're used to, certainly different, but a lot of fun. Certainly a lot of fun.
As always, pleasure to contact with you as well. And
likewise.
It'll be good fun next week as we go to Japan, which last season didn't produce the best of races, I'll admit. However, the intermediate conditions there mixed things up, and it was a CRG Benjamin special, I'd say, that day, when he just destroyed the opposition. But hopefully next week they perform well for us. Yeah, apart from that, Alex, thank you very much for your commentary today.
Thank you, and looking forward to doing it all again next week.
Me too. As we now await the podium drivers to join us. I mean, a surprise race. However, not a surprise winner, I think it's fair to say. As I will go to show you all the winner's car. The Racing Point there, a very nice car. As let me just check. I'm sorry, as the audio will briefly go away. As our, I believe, third place finisher, depending on George Nader's penalty, I'm assuming that will get removed, in which case it will be a third place finisher has arrived. And now we just briefly wait for Duncan and George. But in the meantime, that was a very entertaining race today. As we said many times, race of attrition. Lots of drivers retiring from it. Safety car restart causing a bit of a drama further down the order. That perhaps will be something that some of the stewards will have to have a look at. But I mean, we'll have to wait and see. As always, go follow Formula E League on Instagram if you don't already, so that you can see if there is any changes to the results. Because that could very much change the course of the championship. But at the moment it's just Lars. But okay, whilst we wait for the others, if they are planning on joining, I will interview you, Lars. First of all, how are you feeling after that race?
Pretty decent, to be honest, because I haven't practiced a really lot, but so without practice it was a good result to get P2 because Duncan hasn't got any penalties and I got to, but yeah, good result.
You showed very strong pace throughout the race. Could you talk us through your strategy choice early in that race when you tried to stay out on the soft tyres? What were you thinking there?
Yeah, I was staying out because otherwise I would held by midnight. So I stayed out. My plan A was to go soft hard, but then the safety car came out, so I was going to the pits. I had a lot of fresher mediums, so I could overtake a few people. And after that, I was following Duncan and Berliner to go to the pits.
Well, great drive today. We'll now talk to our race winner. I believe your second win of the season. I believe I may be wrong there. But a fantastic drive from you, Duncan. How hard is it to avoid those penalties today?
Well, it's actually pretty hard. There are really many places to get warnings or penalties. So my plan was just to keep it clean, because when you get no penalties around this track, most of the time you will gain 2 or 3 positions when you cross the line. So yeah, it worked out pretty well.
Also, at the end of that race, saw a bit of rain actually start to fall there. How much did that affect the track? And did you really have to sort of change your driving much to survive that, or was it fairly high grip still?
Well, I expected it to be more slidey than it was. It was actually pretty easy to drive. It was just braking a little bit earlier. Be careful on the throttle, but no, it was pretty easy to drive.
Next week we go to Japan, I believe. What are your thoughts going to that? How do you think you're going to do on that circuit?
Well, it's not a favorite of mine. I mean, it's a really nice track, really fast corners, but it's just not built for me. I don't know, not my track.
Well, yeah. Good luck for next week, and of course, congratulations on your outstanding win today.
Thank you. Thanks.
So yeah, that is it, as I do not think George is going to be able to join the party. So thank you everyone who has stuck around and watched today's race. It was a crazy one from start to finish. But in the end, Duncan comes out on top after a outstanding sort of managing of the penalties, which as always a very tough thing to do, but I absolutely nailed that one today. So yeah, thank you everyone who watched today. Next week is Japan, so make sure to tune into that, as all 3 tiers will be back next week, starting with tier 3 on the Friday. So as always, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll talk to you next week. Goodbye.